I'm Matthew Carlson, and it's all my fault. Politics and elections have always been on the back of my mind. Tapping on my skull is something I should care about. Of course, I'd always put off educating myself for something more entertaining, like watching paint dry. But then, this happened. I remember reading Fraser Anning's horrific statement the first time and being absolutely gutted. I remember literally shaking with rage when I learned that this random bloke was making decisions for me. I remember feeling not just anger or hopelessness, but also extreme guilt. I have no idea who I voted for in my first election. I have no idea if my lack of understanding put this bloke in power. I have no idea who even represents me. And I have a feeling that I'm not the only one. But more on Fraser Anning later. It's clear to me now that people such as myself are ticking time bombs, ready to screw it up for everyone. You shouldn't have to be a political expert to understand politics. It should be easy for an idiot like me to understand all of this. So, it's time for me to grow the hell up and figure out, how does this work? I'm gonna do my best to make this next bit entertaining. Have your Red Bull and coffee ready, and please, bear with me. The goal when creating the Australian government was to try to take the best parts of the English and American governments, add eggs, allow to rise, and we get our Frankenstein's monster of a government. To make it even more confusing, our government is split into 3 separate parts. Governmentlets, if you will. We have local government, which looks after individual cities, state government, which is self-explanatory, and federal, the government that looks after Australia as a whole. Considering the upcoming election, we are going to be focusing mainly on the federal government. We take our little federal Franken government and we split it again to make up 2 houses. We have the House of Representatives, or the lower house. I like to call it the green one, because that's the colour of the chairs. And then there's the Senate, or the red one. This is where Chancellor Palpatine eradicated the Jedi Order, thus collapsing the Galactic Federation. Both these houses are equally as important. Let's start with the red one. The red one is made up of 76 senators, voted in by the Australian public. There are 12 senators for each state and 2 for each territory. This is also where old mate Anning, as a Queensland senator, sits and maniacally twirls his mustache and laughs evilly at kittens and puppies being eaten alive. For some reason, we only re-elect half of the senators every 3 years. Except for sometimes, when we re-elect all of them. Thankfully, Egghead's seat is up for grabs this election. The red one's main job is to review bills and legislation that get sent from the green one. The red ones can be like, yeah, cool, we love it, and it becomes law. Or they'll be like, nah mate, fix this, and the green ones have to sort it out. Staying on theme, voting the red guys in is a weird and confusing system, but we'll get to that later. This is where things start to get really confusing. The green building, I feel, is where you get represented more intimately by politicians. The green one is made up of 150 people who were each voted in by an electorate that they will represent. This year, an extra electorate has been added, making the total 151. But hey, what the hell is an electorate? I live on the fabulous Gold Coast, a city with beaches, national parks, these weird nutsack-looking things, and this atrocity. But, as it turns out, when it comes to the federal election, I don't live on the Gold Coast. I live in an electorate. The Gold Coast is split up into a few electorates. It's easy to find which electorate you belong to on the Australian Electoral Commission website here, or you can find a link in this video's description. My electorate is called McPherson, which also happens to be my boss's last name. I promise I'm doing my job and not researching dumb politics, please don't fire me. Each electorate has roughly 100,000 voters. Come election day, the 18th of May, all Australians will head on up to a voting booth. They're going to vote for who they want to represent their electorate in the green one, as well as the people they want in the red one. The party with the most elected people in the green one then get to internally pick a prime minister, a completely stable and not at all volatile position, of which has not been changed more in the last year than the times Loki has risen from the dead. Asleep yet? We're on the home stretch now, please. Hang on. When you head up to the polling place, you're going to have to line up for like a year. When you finally get to the front, you're going to be given 2 pieces of paper because who needs trees? One is your voting card for the red one, or the Senate, and the other is your voting card for the green one, or the House of Representatives. On one side of the voting card will be the name of the candidate, as well as their party, if they belong to any. On the other side are some empty boxes. This is where you get to cast your vote, starting with the number 1, from your most favourite candidate to your least favourite. Yes, you have to number every single box. But why do I have to number the politicians I don't want to win? Why do I have to care about those that don't live up to my ideals? Unfortunately, it usually becomes a lesser of two evils situation. Welcome to the government battle royale. Here are our politicians in the order I voted. Let's say I voted based on their stance on murdering kittens. This guy over here is against it, while this guy over here is all for feline genocide. All of the electorate's votes are counted. Whoever you wrote in a 1 for gets your vote. Uh-oh, it looks like the kitten killer got the most first preference votes. That means he wins, right? Thankfully, no. The kitten murderer has the most first preference votes, but he needs to have more than half of the total votes to get elected. So, we find the one who lost. Look. It's the one that I voted for. See ya, buddy. But now, all the people that voted for the loser need to vote for someone else. So, they move to their second preference, whoever they put in 2 for. And we continue this, eliminating candidates with the least votes and moving the voters around until there is one candidate with more than half the votes. Oh, look. While it's not the person I necessarily wanted, at least it's not the guy on the end. My kitten lives another day. When I first read about this system, I thought it was ridiculously overcomplicated. Why not just pick one person and leave it? The reason actually makes quite a lot of sense. If our system was pick one person and hope for the best, it wouldn't actually make sense to vote for whoever you wanted. Let's pretend our system was pick one and leave it. In any election, there's 2 or 3 candidates that are more than likely going to win. I want to vote for this guy, but if I vote for him, even when I know he's going to lose, what's the point of even showing up? I'd pretty much be throwing away my vote. While it's really fun to make fun of politics, I have to say this system is pretty damn awesome. Not only do I get to make my voice heard regarding this guy, he also gets extra campaign funding for the next time he runs based on how many votes he receives. This system is awesome, and it would make perfect sense if the red guys did it the same way. Except they don't. In this system, politicians don't need half of all votes, they only need a percentage. And when they reach that percentage, the extra votes are split up in a weird way. This uses a strange thing called math, and it will be too hard to explain it here. If you'd like to know how the votes are split, look it up. For added frustration, when voting for the red one, you get 2 options, above the line or below the line, as represented here by an overpriced Gucci belt. While voting above the belt is still a good time, below the belt is where the real fun begins. You can only vote above the belt or below the belt, not both. To vote below the belt, you number candidates' boxes from 1 to at least 12. You can do more, but that's up to you. Below the belt, you're voting for individual candidates. When you vote above the belt, you're voting for political parties. To vote above the belt, you pretty much have to put your complete faith in these parties. You number the boxes 1 to 6, and then those parties delegate your vote to their most favoured candidate. Once again, this is a valid way to vote. However, I strongly suggest going below the belt. While you might have an undying trust in a political party, the individuals within that party might not. A system this complicated is like an egg in a 9th grade science project, being dropped over and over again. Eventually, it's gonna crack on a crooked politician's head. Speaking of Mr. Fraser Anning, he's not just the reason I wanted to make this video, he's also the reason I'm pro below the belt. While this next segment could be an entire video in itself, I feel obligated to give you the quick version. Once upon a time, there was a party called One Nation. One Nation's candidates were Poopy Pauline Hanson and Muddy Malcolm Roberts. During the 2016 election, all the people who voted above the belt for One Nation essentially showered these two in votes. But then, in a somewhat ironic twist considering the party's prehistoric views, it turned out Malcolm wasn't even an Australian citizen. While this was possibly the funniest thing to ever happen, ever, this meant that all of the above the belt votes now went to the mean, scary, dirty, smelly, eggy Fraser Anning. Now, with the Senate seat in his greasy hands, he left One Nation, the very party that gave him power. And he still kept his seat. This means that all of those poor people that thought they were voting for One Nation ended up voting for someone who didn't even end up staying in the party. The end. While these were extreme circumstances, I for one don't think it's worth the risk. I don't agree with the people that vote for One Nation, but the moment their vote is taken from them, democracy has failed. I feel like now, finally, I am satisfied with my understanding of something obviously important, just absolutely bloody boring. I feel like I now know how this works. However, I now find myself with an even bigger question. Who should I vote for? Before I continue, I am not going to tell you who to vote for. That's not what I'm here to do. I only wish to help you come up with your own informed decision. Now, when I first came up with the idea for this video, what I really wanted to do was go through each and every electorate, candidate by candidate, and try and figure out what they stood for. It's not that easy. For some reason, the Prime Minister is allowed to call an election whenever he wants, once every 3 years. This seems quite dodgy to me. Back on the 11th of April, the Prime Minister set a date for the 18th of May. This gives people like me only 1 month to figure out who they're going to vote for. I'm somehow expected to come up with an informed decision in like 3 and a bit weeks. That's never going to happen. That's practically impossible for someone like me who's never looked into politics before. Not only that, but the cutoff date for candidates to sign up was just 12 days after the election was called. This gave all the independent candidates just a little over a week to get all their call flute and billboards and advertisement together, when the people who were already elected had that just ready to go. So, I went to look for a list of candidates. Surely there was some spot that I could go to find who I was voting for. It didn't exist. The list wasn't made available until the 24th of April. You can find that list here, or in the description down below. Down there's another link to another website where you can answer a bunch of questions, and the website will spit out which political party and candidates you're most likely going to agree with. Sounds great. However, there is the complete lack of any information on independent candidates. That is, candidates that don't belong to any individual political party. Now, all I want to be able to do is to be able to make a informed, educated, safe decision which is with as much information as possible. However, this system to me, seems rigged to keep the people already with power in power, because the only candidate I could find any substantial information on was the one that already ran the joint. One that runs strange ads like this. I reached out to Karen Andrews for an interview. I have some questions that I want some clarification on. Unfortunately, I was told that her schedule was too full. Full of things like posting this picture to Twitter. This is real. Someone actually thought this was a good idea to post. This is burned into your mind too now. You can't unsee this. Look, Miss Andrews is in no way obligated to give me an interview. However, this is pretty damn funny. This is Australia's Minister for Industry, Science and Technology, and she can't even figure out how to use Photoshop for... While my first question, how does the federal government work, was answered, I'm left feeling quite unsatisfied. I'm clear on how it works, but still so confused as to why it works the way that it does, particularly in regards to the lead up of the upcoming election. I've tried itemizing my personal core values, things that I really care about. Green energy, a better M1, fast internet, human rights, the koalas, the sharks, the big one for me, environmental preservation. But it's hard to find information on individual candidates, and even then, the wording on their websites is sticky. There's lots of long sentences with little to no context, and the independent candidates are sorely underrepresented. I realised while producing this that it is not the want to understand that drives me to figure out how politics work. It's anger and frustration. It always has been. I'm angry at the people who want to drill for oil in places they shouldn't. I'm angry about how the NBN is looking to turn out. I'm angry at the people who seem to care more about dollar signs than this awesome natural paradise we live in. I feel angry at someone or something, and I just want to know who. For now, this bloke will have to do. Go online, research your candidates. There's lots of dumb stuff going on, and we finally have a chance to fix it. I'm Matthew Carlson. That's how this works.